I had heard the legend of the Jersey Devil growing up in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey. My grandparents used to tell me the tale of the creature born to Mother Leeds in 1735, a deformed and cursed child that sprouted wings, hooves, and a tail, and flew off into the dense woods. While the story was part of local folklore, I never believed it was anything more than a spooky campfire tale. That is, until one fateful night changed my perception forever. It was a chilly autumn evening, and my friends and I decided to go camping in the heart of the Pine Barrens. We set up our tents in a clearing surrounded by ancient, gnarled trees. The air was crisp, and the night was unusually quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves. As we gathered around the campfire, roasting marshmallows and telling ghost stories, we joked about the Jersey Devil, daring each other to venture deeper into the woods. Around midnight, with the fire dwindling and our laughter subsiding, we decided to call it a night. I crawled into my tent, the cold air biting at my skin. I had just started to drift off when I heard a strange nausea, a high-pitched, almost human-like scream that echoed through the trees. My heart raced, and I sat up, straining to hear. The scream came again, louder and closer this time. My friends, now fully awake, looked as terrified as I felt. We grabbed our flashlights and cautiously stepped out of our tents, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The air was thick with tension, and the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Suddenly, we heard heavy footsteps approaching from the direction of the scream. The sound grew louder, the ground trembling with each step. Out of the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It stood on two legs, towering over us, with a grotesque, horse-like face and glowing red eyes. Bat-like wings unfurled from its back, and its long, forked tail lashed through the air. We were frozen in place, unable to comprehend the horror before us. The Jersey Devil let out another blood-curdling scream and charged towards us. We bolted, running blindly through the forest, our flashlights bouncing wildly. The creature was right behind us, its heavy breathing and pounding footsteps driving us to run faster. I could hear my friends shouting, but their voices seemed distant and distorted, drowned out by the sound of my own panicked heartbeat. I stumbled over a tree root and fell hard. The wind knocked out of me. I turned to see the Jersey Devil looming over me, its eyes burning with an unnatural fire. I thought this was the end, that I would be another victim of the legendary beast. But then, miraculously, it hesitated, its gaze shifting to something behind me. I seized the opportunity and scrambled to my feet, running as fast as my legs would carry me. I didn't stop until I burst out of the woods and into the relative safety of a nearby road. My friends soon joined me, all of us gasping for breath and covered in scratches and bruises. We didn't say a word, just silently agreed to never speak of what had happened. The next day, we packed up our campsite in silence, the weight of our encounter hanging over us like a dark cloud. We tried to convince ourselves that it was just a wild animal or a trick of the light, but deep down, we knew the truth. We had come face to face with the Jersey Devil, a creature of legend that still roams the Pine Barrens. To this day, I can't shake the memory of those glowing red eyes and the sound of that unearthly scream. I avoid the Pine Barrens, and whenever someone brings up the legend of the Jersey Devil, I feel a cold shiver run down my spine. The Jersey Devil is real, and it is still out there, a haunting reminder of the dark secrets that lurk in the shadows of our world. Growing up in the remote forests of northern Minnesota, I had always been fascinated by the tales of the Wendigo, a malevolent spirit said to dwell in the wilderness, preying on those who venture too far into its domain. My grandfather, a Native American elder, would often warn us about the Wendigo, describing it as a creature with an insatiable hunger for human flesh and a cold, unyielding heart. He told us that the Wendigo could possess humans, driving them to commit unspeakable acts of cannibalism. Though I found the stories intriguing, I never truly believed them until one fateful winter changed everything. It was late January, and the temperature had plummeted to record lows. The snow lay thick on the ground, blanketing the world in an eerie silence. My friends and I, eager for adventure, decided to spend the weekend at a remote cabin deep in the woods. The cabin belonged to my friend Alex's family and was the perfect place for a winter getaway. The first night was peaceful, filled with laughter, hot cocoa, and the warmth of the fireplace. But as the second night fell, a sense of unease began to creep over us. The wind howled outside, and the trees groaned under the weight of the snow. As we settled in for the night, the temperature inside the cabin dropped dramatically despite the roaring fire. I awoke in the middle of the night to the sound of footsteps crunching in the snow outside. At first I thought it was one of my friends, but then I heard a low, guttural growl that made my blood run cold. I lay still, straining to listen, my heart pounding in my chest. The growl came again, followed by a high-pitched, wailing cry that echoed through the forest. Terrified, I crept out of bed and peeked through the window. In the dim light of the moon, I saw a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was tall and emaciated, with long, claw-like fingers and eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. The creature's face was gaunt, its mouth twisted into a gruesome snarl. I knew instantly what it was: Wendigo. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. I had to warn my friends. I hurried to wake them, my voice barely above a whisper. We gathered in the living room, our fear palpable. Alex, the most skeptical of the group, suggested we grab our hunting rifles and confront whatever was out there. Despite my better judgment, I agreed, not wanting to leave anyone alone in the cabin. We stepped outside, the frigid air biting at our exposed skin. The moon cast long shadows across the snow, and the forest seemed to close in around us. We scanned the tree line, our breath visible in the cold night air. Suddenly, the wailing cry echoed through the woods again, closer this time. I raised my rifle, my hands trembling. Out of the darkness, the Wendigo emerged, his eyes fixed on us with a hunger that sent chills down my spine. Alex fired a shot, but it missed, the bullet disappearing into the trees. The creature lunged at us with a speed and ferocity that took us by surprise. We stumbled back, firing wildly in a desperate attempt to fend it off. The Wendigo's claws raked across my arm, sending a searing pain through my body. I fell to the ground, my vision blurring. Through the haze of pain, I saw the creature standing over me, its breath hot and rancid. Just as it seemed ready to strike again, a loud bang rang out, and the Wendigo recoiled, shrieking in pain. Alex had managed to land a shot. Taking advantage of the moment, I scrambled to my feet, and we ran back to the cabin, slamming the door behind us. We barricaded the door with furniture, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. Outside, the Wendigo howled in fury, its cries growing more distant as the night wore on. We didn't sleep for the rest of the night, too terrified to close our eyes. When morning finally came, we cautiously ventured outside. There was no sign of the Wendigo, but the marks left on the cabin and the deep gouges in the snow were undeniable proof of our encounter. We packed up and left the cabin as quickly as we could, vowing never to return. The drive back to town was silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts. The terror of that night stayed with us, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurks in the wilderness. I never spoke of the Wendigo encounter again, but the scars on my arms serve as a constant reminder of the creature's reality. The legend of the Wendigo is more than just a story, it's a warning. There are things in the forest that defy explanation, and some doors, once open, can never be closed. Living in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, met growing up with the eerie legend of the Mothman. My grandfather would often recount the tale of the creature, describing it as a humanoid figure with large red eyes and enormous wings. According to the legend, the Mothman was a harbinger of doom, appearing before disasters and bringing misfortune to those who encountered it. Although I had always been skeptical of the stories, my perspective changed one fateful autumn night. It was late October, and the air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves. My friends and I decided to visit the old T&T area on the outskirts of town, a place known for its eerie atmosphere and abandoned munitions bunkers. We had heard countless stories about the Mothman sightings in the area, and feeling adventurous, we wanted to see if there was any truth to the legend. We arrived just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the decaying structures. The area was overgrown with weeds, and the buildings stood in silent disrepair. As darkness fell, an uneasy feeling settled over us. The stillness of the place was unsettling, and the slightest rustle of leaves or snap of a twig made us jump. We wandered deeper into the site, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The stories we had heard began to play on our minds, and every shadow seemed to take on a sinister shape. We were about to call it a night when we heard a strange, high-pitched screech that echoed through the air. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. A sudden gust of wind blew past us, carrying with it an unnatural chill. My friend Chris pointed his flashlight toward a distant bunker, his hand trembling. "Did you see that?" he whispered. I turned to look and caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows, a pair of glowing red eyes staring back at us. Panic set in, and we decided to leave immediately. As we hurried back to the car, the screeching sound grew louder, closer. I glanced back and saw a large, dark figure with wings unfurling from its back. The creature's eyes glowed an eerie red, cutting through the darkness like beacons of terror. We broke into a sprint, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The creature took flight, its massive wings beating against the night air. It swooped low, and I could feel the rush of wind as it passed overhead. We reached the car and scrambled inside, locking the doors and starting the engine. As we sped away, the Mothman followed, keeping pace with the car for several terrifying moments before finally veering off into the trees. Back in town, We tried to make sense of what had happened. We were shaken and exhausted, our minds reeling from the encounter. None of us could deny what we had seen, and the legend of the Mothman took on a new, terrifying reality. In the days that followed, we noticed strange occurrences around town, unexplained accidents, power outages, and an overall sense of unease seemed to pervade Point Pleasant. It was as if the Mothman's presence had cast a shadow over the entire town. Determined to understand more, I delved into the history of the Mothman sightings. I learned about the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge in 1967, an event that many locals believe was foretold by the creature's appearance. The more I read, the more I realize that our encounter was just one of many, and the Mothman had been haunting Point Pleasant for decades. One night, while poring over old newspaper clippings, I came across a photo that made my blood run cold. It was a grainy black and white image of the Mothman, taken by a local resident in the 1960s. The eyes, the wings, the menacing presence sight was exactly what we had seen that night in the TNT area. I couldn't shake the feeling that the Mothman was watching us, waiting for the next disaster to strike. I began to notice the creature's eyes in my dreams, always watching, always waiting. The sense of impending doom was overwhelming, and I started to wonder if we had somehow brought the Mothman's curse upon ourselves. Despite my fear, I continued to research, hoping to find a way to break the cycle of terror. I spoke to other witnesses, people who had seen the Mothman and experienced its chilling presence. Each story was unique, but the underlying theme was the same. The Mothman appeared before tragedy struck. As time went on, the sightings became less frequent, but the legend never died. Point Pleasant remained under the shadow of the Mothman, a constant reminder of the unknown forces that lurk in the darkness. I moved away eventually, seeking to escape the nightmares and the sense of dread that had become a part of my life. But even now, years later, I can't forget that night in the TNT area. The Mothman still haunts my dreams, its red eyes burning into my soul. I know that somewhere, in the dark corners of the world, the creature is still out there, watching and waiting. Growing up in southern New Jersey, I had always heard the tales of the Jersey Devil. It was a story passed down through generations, a piece of local folklore that both intrigued and terrified us as kids. The Pine Barrens, a vast expanse of forested land, was said to be its home. Although I was skeptical, part of me always wondered if there was some truth to the legend. I got my answer one summer when my friends and I decided to go camping in the heart of the Pine Barrens. We arrived at our campsite in the late afternoon, the sun casting long shadows through the trees. The forest was dense and quiet, with only the occasional rustle of leaves breaking the silence. As we set up our tents and gathered firewood, we joked about the Jersey Devil, daring each other to venture deeper into the woods once night fell. As dusk settled in, we built a campfire and began to tell ghost stories. The air grew cool, and an eerie stillness descended upon the forest. Our laughter and banter gradually faded as the darkness closed in around us. We were on edge, every snap of a twig or rustle in the bushes making us jump. Around midnight, we decided to explore the forest a bit. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, we ventured away from the safety of our campsite. The trees seemed to close in on us, their gnarled branches casting sinister shadows on the ground. The deeper we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. We had walked for about 20 minutes when we heard a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from all around us. We stopped dead in our tracks, shining our flashlights into the darkness. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the underbrush. My heart pounded in my chest as I scanned the forest, searching for the source of the noise. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a pair of glowing red eyes staring at us from the shadows. I felt a chill run down my spine, and my breath caught in my throat. The eyes were set high off the ground, much higher than any animal we could think of. Before we could react, the creature stepped into the beam of my flashlight. It was massive, standing at least 7 feet tall, with leathery wings folded against its back. Its head was that of a horse, with long, sharp teeth and a pair of twisted horns. Its body was covered in dark, matted fur, and it had cloven hooves that dug into the ground as it moved. We stood frozen in terror as the Jersey Devil let out an ear-piercing screech, a sound that echoed through the forest and seemed to shake the very ground beneath our feet. The creature took a step toward us, and that was all it took to break our paralysis. We turned and ran, crashing through the underbrush in a desperate bid to escape. The forest seemed to close in around us, the trees blurring as we sprinted back to our campsite. The screeching continued, growing fainter as we put distance between ourselves and the creature. We burst into the clearing where our tents were set up, breathless and shaking, and quickly doused the campfire. We huddled together, too scared to speak, listening for any sign that the Jersey Devil had followed us. The night passed in a tense, sleepless vigil. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig set our nerves on edge. But the creature did not return. As the first light of dawn filtered through the trees, we packed up our gear and left the pine barrens as quickly as we could, vowing never to return. In the days that followed, we struggled to come to terms with what we had seen. The encounter had shaken us to our core, and the legend of the Jersey Devil was no longer just a story to us. It was a terrifying reality, a reminder that there are things in this world that defy explanation. I tried to research more about the Jersey Devil, reading accounts of other sightings and encounters. Each story was different, but they all shared a common thread, a sense of overwhelming fear and a creature that seemed to be beyond the natural world. To this day I can't explain what we saw that night in the Pine Barrens. Some say it was a trick of the light, a product of our overactive imaginations. But I know what I saw, and the memory of those glowing red eyes and the screeching cry of the Jersey Devil will haunt me for the rest of my life. When my best friend Jason suggested a winter camping trip in the remote forests of northern Minnesota, I was initially hesitant. The idea of braving the freezing temperatures and snow-covered terrain didn't exactly appeal to me. However, Jason was persuasive, and the thought of a rugged adventure away from the hustle and bustle of city life eventually won me over. Little did I know, this trip would turn into a nightmare I would never forget. We set out on a crisp January morning, the sky clear and the air biting cold. Our destination was a secluded spot deep in the wilderness, far from any trails or signs of civilization. The journey was arduous, with heavy packs and snowshoes, slowing our progress, but the beauty of the pristine landscape kept our spirits high. By the time we reached our campsite, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the snow. We quickly set up our tent and built a fire, eager to warm up and cook some dinner. As darkness fell, the forest around us grew eerily silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire and the occasional snap of a twig. After dinner, we settled in for the night, huddled in our sleeping bags inside the tent. The temperature had dropped significantly, and I could feel the cold seeping through the fabric. Despite the discomfort, I eventually drifted off to sleep, lulled by the sounds of the forest. I woke abruptly in the middle of the night, a sense of unease gnawing at me. I listened intently, straining to hear any sound that might have disturbed my sleep. At first there was nothing, just the faint rustle of the wind through the trees. But then I heard a distant, mournful howl that sent a chill down my spine. I glanced over at Jason, who was still sound asleep, and debated whether to wake him. The howl came again, closer this time, and I decided it was better to have someone else awake with me. I gently shook his shoulder, whispering his name. He stirred and gradually opened his eyes, his expression quickly turning to concern as I explained what I had heard. We sat in silence, listening to the night. The howling had stopped, but the forest felt different, as if it were holding its breath. Suddenly, there was a loud crash outside the tent, followed by the sound of something heavy moving through the snow. My heart raced, and I felt a surge of fear. What could be out there in the middle of the night? Jason grabbed his flashlight and unzipped the tent, peering into the darkness. The beam of light cut through the blackness, revealing nothing but trees and snow. Just as he was about to close the tent, we heard a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from all around us. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, primal and menacing. Jason turned off the flashlight and zipped the tent back up, his face pale. We both knew we were not alone, and whatever was out there was not something we wanted to confront. We sat in the darkness, our breaths shallow and our ears straining for any sound. Minutes felt like hours as we waited, the tension unbearable. Then the growling started again, followed by the sound of something large moving closer. The tent fabric rustled, and I could see a shadow pass by, blocking out the faint moonlight. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The creature sniffed around the tent, its hot breath visible in the cold air. I could make out a faint, sickly sweet smell, like rotting meat. I felt a surge of nausea and terror. Jason and I remained frozen, praying that whatever it was would move on. After what felt like an eternity, the growling stopped, and the creature moved away. We waited, listening intently until we were certain it was gone. Slowly, we allowed ourselves to breathe again, though the fear still lingered. Neither of us slept for the rest of the night. As soon as dawn broke, we packed up our gear and left the campsite as quickly as possible. The forest, which had seemed so beautiful and inviting the day before, now felt menacing and oppressive. We made our way back to the nearest town, both of us haunted by the night's events. Over breakfast at a local diner, we discussed what we had encountered. Jason, who had grown up hearing stories of the Wendigo malevolent spirit from Algonquian folklore that could possess and devour humans, was convinced that was what we had encountered. I was skeptical at first, but the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. The Wendigo was said to inhabit the northern forests, preying on those who ventured too far into its territory. The growling, the rotten smell, the feeling of being hunted at all matched the descriptions I had read. Our experience in the wilderness had shaken us both to our cores. We decided to cut our trip short and return home, neither of us willing to risk another encounter. As we drove away, I couldn't help but glance back at the forest, wondering if the Wendigo was watching us leave, waiting for its next victims. That winter camping trip changed me. The wilderness, once a place of beauty and adventure, now held a sinister edge. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of knowing that there are things in this world that defy explanation and reason. The legend of the Wendigo was no longer just a story, it was a terrifying reality that I had faced and survived. I've always loved the great outdoors, and hiking has been my favorite escape from the daily grind. Living in the rural parts of Michigan, I had countless trails to explore. However, my passion for hiking would lead me to an encounter that forever altered my perception of the woods. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, the kind of day that makes you feel alive. The leaves were a riot of color, painting the landscape with shades of red, orange, and gold. I decided to explore a lesser-known trail that wound through a dense forest near my home. I'd heard rumors about strange sightings in this area, but I dismissed them as local legends. The first few hours of my hike were peaceful. The only sounds were the crunch of leaves underfoot and the occasional rustle of a squirrel darting through the underbrush. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, I felt a sudden chill in the air. The forest, once vibrant and welcoming, now seemed to close in around me. I quickened my pace, eager to reach the clearing where I planned to set up camp for the night. That's when I noticed something odd. A peculiar silence had descended upon the forest. The usual sounds of wildlife had vanished, replaced by an eerie stillness. I stopped and looked around, sensing that I wasn't alone. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of movement. I turned my head quickly, but whatever it was had disappeared behind a tree. My heart began to race. I told myself it was just a deer or some other animal, but deep down I knew something was off. I continued on, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. The clearing was just ahead, and I wanted to reach it before darkness fell completely. As I broke through the trees, I saw the clearing bathed in the last light of the setting sun. I breathed a sigh of relief and started to unpack my gear. That's when I heard a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from all around me. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The growl grew louder, more menacing, and I could hear the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the underbrush. I turned slowly, and that's when I saw it. Standing at the edge of the clearing, partially hidden by the shadows, was a creature unlike anything I had ever seen. It was tall, easily 7 feet, with a muscular build covered in dark, matted fur. Its head was like that of a wolf, but its eyes glowed with an unnatural intelligence. The creature stepped forward, and I could see its claws, sharp and glinting in the fading light. It snarled, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. My mind raced, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. This was no ordinary animal. It was the Dogman, a legendary cryptid that had been sighted in Michigan for decades. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like lead. The dogman began to circle the clearing, its eyes never leaving mine. I knew I had to do something, but I was paralyzed with fear. Then, without warning, the creature lunged at me. Instinct took over, and I dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its claws. I scrambled to my feet and grabbed a large branch from the ground, brandishing it like a weapon. The dogman snarled again, this time with a hint of amusement, as if it enjoyed toying with me. We faced off, the clearing filled with an electric tension. The creature made another move, and I swung the branch with all my might. It struck the dogman's shoulder, and I heard a sickening crack. The beast howled in pain and rage, but it didn't back down. I knew I couldn't fight it off forever. My only chance was to make a run for it. Summoning every ounce of courage, I turned and sprinted towards the trail, not daring to look back. I could hear the dogman crashing through the underbrush behind me, its growls echoing through the forest. Branches whipped at my face, and my lungs burned as I ran faster than I ever thought possible. The trail seemed to stretch on forever, but I couldn't stop. I could feel the dogman gaining on me, its hot breath on the back of my neck. Just when I thought I couldn't run any further, I saw the lights of my truck in the distance. I pushed myself harder, my legs screaming in protest. I reached the truck, fumbling with the keys as I glanced over my shoulder. The dogman was there, its eyes glowing with a feral intensity. I managed to unlock the door and throw myself inside, slamming it shut just as the creature reached the truck. It clawed at the door, leaving deep gouges in the metal. I started the engine and floored the gas pedal, tearing out of the forest and leaving the dogman behind. I drove straight home, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. When I finally reached the safety of my house, I collapsed on the couch, my mind reeling from the encounter. I knew that what I had seen was real, and it had changed me forever. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I told a few close friends about my experience, but most of them were skeptical. They thought I had imagined it, or that it was just a wild animal. But I knew the truthy had come face to face with the dogman, and I was lucky to be alive. Since that night, I've never gone hiking alone again. The woods, once a place of solace and adventure, now hold a dark and terrifying memory. The dogman is out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And I'll never forget the night I became one of the few who live to tell the tale. Growing up on the Navajo reservation in Arizona, I'd heard countless stories about Skinwalkersville witches that could transform into animals. My grandparents would share these tales around the fire, warning us to never stray too far from home at night. I listened with wide-eyed fascination, but never truly believed. That is, until one summer night changed everything. I was 18 and had just graduated high school. My friends and I decided to celebrate with a camping trip deep in the desert. We wanted to be away from the prying eyes of our parents and the small-town gossip. We loaded up a truck with supplies, and by late afternoon, we reached a secluded spot miles away from civilization. As night fell, we gathered around the fire, laughing and sharing stories. The sky was clear, the stars bright, and the air filled with the sounds of crickets and the occasional coyote howl. It was perfect until we started hearing something strange. It began with a low, guttural growl coming from the darkness beyond our campfire's glow. We brushed it off as just another coyote, but then the growl was followed by what sounded like a human voice, mimicking our laughter. The hair on the back of my neck stood up. My friend Alex laughed nervously. Probably just some kids messing with us, he said, but his eyes betrayed his unease. We decided to ignore it, hoping it would go away. An hour later, I needed to relieve myself, so I walked a short distance from the camp, flashlight in hand. As I finished, I heard a rustling in the bushes. I shone my flashlight towards the sound and froze. Standing there, just beyond the light's reach, was a coyote, but something was wrong. Its eyes glowed a sickly yellow, and it was unnaturally still, watching me with an intelligence that sent chills down my spine. I slowly backed away, keeping the flashlight trained on the coyote. It didn't move. I turned and sprinted back to camp, my heart pounding in my chest. When I told my friends what I saw, they laughed it off, but I could see the fear in their eyes. We all knew the stories, and deep down, we knew what I had seen. We decided to keep the fire burning all night and took turns keeping watch. As the hours dragged on, the strange sounds, continuedrils, whispers, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps circling our camp. Each time we shone our flashlights into the darkness, we saw nothing. Around 3 a.m., it was my turn to keep watch. The fire crackled softly, and my friends were fast asleep. I was struggling to stay awake when I heard a voice calling my name. It was my mother's voice, coming from the darkness. "Tyler, come here," the voice called. My blood ran cold. I knew my mother was miles away, safe at home. I grabbed a burning log from the fire and held it out like a torch, peering into the darkness. Suddenly a figure emerged from the shadows. It was a man, but not quite. His features were distorted, his eyes glowing yellow like the coyote's. He was naked, his body covered in strange, twisted symbols. He smiled, a chilling, predatory smile, and took a step towards me. I swung the burning log, and he recoiled, hissing like a snake. The fire seemed to frighten him. "Stay back," I shouted, my voice shaking. The figure's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure hatred. He let out a guttural growl and disappeared into the darkness. I woke my friends, and we decided it was time to leave. We packed up our camp in record time, constantly looking over our shoulders. As we drove away, I looked back and saw the figure standing on a ridge, watching us with those glowing yellow eyes. For weeks after the trip, I was haunted by nightmares of the Skinwalker. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, and strange things started happening around my house. Objects moving on their own, animals behaving strangely. My grandparents performed a cleansing ceremony, and slowly the feeling of dread began to lift. I never went camping in the desert again. The stories my grandparents told were no longer just tales to scare children. They were warnings. The Skinwalker was real, and I had come face to face with the evil that lurks in the darkness. Growing up in the small town of Barrow, Alaska, I'd always heard the legends of the Wendigo, an evil spirit that roams the forests, driven by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. My father used to warn me about the Wendigo when I was a child, saying it could possess those who were lost or starving in the wilderness. I never believed him, thinking it was just a way to keep me from wandering too far from home. That all changed one fateful winter when I was 17. It was the coldest winter in decades, and The snowdrifts were taller than most of the houses in town. My best friend, Jake, and I decided to go on a hunting trip deep into the forest. We were experienced hunters, confident in our ability to track game, even in the harshest conditions. We packed our gear and set out early in the morning, eager for the adventure. The forest was eerily quiet as we trekked through the deep snow. The trees loomed overhead, their branches heavy with ice. We found a trail of deer tracks and followed them for hours, deeper into the wilderness than we had ever gone before. As the sun began to set, we realized we were hopelessly lost. We should head back, Jake said, glancing around nervously. It's getting dark, and I don't like the feel of this place. I nodded in agreement, but as we turned to leave, a chilling wind swept through the trees, carrying with it a faint, whispering voice. It was almost as if the forest itself was speaking to us. We froze, listening intently. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, but we couldn't make out the words. "What the hell is that?" Jake muttered, his eyes wide with fear. "Probably just the wind," I said, though I didn't believe it myself. The whispers sounded disturbingly human. We quickened our pace, trying to retrace our steps, but the forest seemed to shift around us, the trees closing in. The whispers followed us, growing louder and more frenzied. Panic set in as we realized we were walking in circles, the same twisted tree appearing again and again. "We need to find shelter," Jake said, his voice trembling. "Well, freeze to death out here." We stumbled upon a small, abandoned cabin just as night fell. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, musty interior. It wasn't much, but it would keep us out of the freezing wind. We started a fire in the old stone fireplace and huddled close, trying to shake off the cold and fear. As the fire crackled, the whispers seemed to seep through the walls of the cabin. I could see the fear in Jake's eyes mirroring my own. "Do you think it's the Wendigo?" he asked in a hushed voice. I wanted to laugh it off, but the look on his face stopped me. "I don't know," I admitted, "but we need to stay calm and wait for morning. Maybe the storm will pass, and we can find our way back." The night dragged on, the whispers growing louder and more insistent. I could swear they were calling our names. Jake started muttering to himself, his eyes darting around the room. "We're not alone," he kept saying. "It's out there, watching us." Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke to find Jake standing by the window, staring out into the darkness. "Jake, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice thick with sleep. "It's calling me," he said, his voice distant and hollow. "I have to go to it." "Jake." "No." I jumped up and grabbed his arm, trying to pull him away from the window, but his eyes were glazed over, and he seemed to be in a trance. With a sudden, violent shove, he knocked me to the ground and bolted out the door. I scrambled to my feet and chased after him, the freezing wind cutting through me like a knife. The whispers were deafening now, swirling around me, filling my head with a cacophony of voices. I spotted Jake up ahead, running through the snow towards the twisted tree. "Jake, stop," I shouted, but he didn't even glance back. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning with the effort. I reached him just as he collapsed at the base of the tree, his body convulsing. "Jake, please," I begged, trying to lift him, but he was ice cold to the touch. His eyes fluttered open, and for a moment I saw a flicker of recognition. "It's inside me," he whispered, his voice a raspy breath. "Run, before it takes you too." Tears streamed down my face as I realized what was happening. The Wendigo had possessed my friend, and there was nothing I could do to save him. With a heavy heart, I turned and fled, the whispers chasing me through the forest. I ran blindly through the trees, not knowing where I was going, just wanting to get away from the horror I had witnessed. By some miracle, I stumbled upon a search party from the town. They had been looking for us since the storm began. I tried to explain what had happened, but they didn't believe me. They said Jake had probably succumbed to the elements, his mind playing tricks on him. But I knew the truth. The Wendigo was real, and it had taken my friend. I never went back into the forest after that. The whispers haunted my dreams, a constant reminder of the night I lost Jake. The townsfolk said he was just another victim of the harsh Alaskan winter, but I knew better. The Wendigo was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next victim. I've always been fascinated by tales of the unknown, especially those surrounding cryptid creatures that exist on the fringes of belief and science. Little did I know that my own encounter with one of these mysterious beings would shake me to my core. It was a cool, misty morning when I ventured into the remote woods of the Pacific Northwest. Armed with nothing but my camera and a sense of adventure, I set out to capture the beauty of nature and perhaps stumble upon a cryptid or two. As I ventured deeper into the dense forest, a sense of anticipation grew within me. The woods seemed to hum with an energy that I couldn't quite explain, as if something ancient and primal lurked just beyond the trees. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footfalls crunching through the underbrush. My heart skipped a beat as I strained to see through the dense foliage, my pulse quickening with every step. And then I saw a creature unlike anything I had ever seen before, standing nearly 10 feet tall, with fur-covered limbs and glowing amber eyes. It was a sight straight out of a nightmare. It was a cryptid creature that defied all logical explanation. Fear gripped me as I watched the creature move with an eerie grace, its movements fluid and deliberate. I knew I should run, to flee from this unknown entity, and never look back. But something held me rooted to the spot, a morbid curiosity that compelled me to stay and face whatever fate awaited me. The cryptid turned its gaze towards me, its eyes locking on to mine with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I felt as if it could see right through me, peering into the depths of my soul with a gaze that was both mesmerizing and terrifying. For what felt like an eternity, he stood locked in our silent standoff, neither willing to make the first move. And then, with a suddenness that took me by surprise, the cryptid turned and vanished into the depths of the forest, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the lingering sense of unease. As I made my way back to civilization, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had witnessed something truly extraordinary. Whether it was a trick of the light or a genuine encounter with a cryptid, I may never know for sure. But one thing is certain, my brush with the unknown has left an indelible mark on my soul, a reminder of the mysteries that lie hidden in the dark corners of the world. And who knows, perhaps one day I will return to the woods in search of answers, to uncover the truth behind the cryptid that crossed my path on that fateful day. Until then, the memory of that encounter will stay with me, a constant reminder of the awe and terror that comes with venturing into the unknown. Growing up on the Navajo reservation, I was no stranger to tales of the supernatural, but nothing could have prepared me for the terror that awaited me one fateful night, when I encountered a Skinwalker, malevolent shapeshifter that prowls the desert under the cover of darkness. It was a moonless night, the sky painted with a tapestry of stars as I made my way home from a friend's house. The air was thick with the scent of sagebrush, and an eerie silence hung over the desert landscape. As I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every rustle of the wind, every snap of a twig sent a shiver down my spine, and I quickened my pace, eager to escape the oppressive stillness of the night. That's when I heard a sound of soft footsteps padding along behind me, matching my every move with an unnatural precision. I turned, but there was nothing there, just the empty expanse of the desert stretching out before me. Heart pounding, I continued on my way, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But the feeling of being followed persisted, growing stronger with each passing moment. And then, out of the darkness, it emerged a figure draped in shadows, its form shifting and twisting in the moonlight. It was a Skinwalker, a creature of Navajo legend, said to possess the ability to take on the form of any animal it desires. I froze, my breath catching in my throat as the Skinwalker drew closer, its eyes gleaming with a malevolent intelligence. I knew I should run, to flee from this unholy creature, and never look back. But something held me rooted to the spot, a primal fear that left me paralyzed with terror. The Skinwalker drew closer, its form flickering and shifting as it moved. I could hear its breath, ragged and labored, like the rasping of dry leaves in the wind. And then, with a suddenness that took me by surprise, it lunged. I stumbled backward, scrambling to put distance between myself and the creature. But it was too late. With a swift motion, the Skinwalker was upon me, its claws tearing into my flesh with a sickening crunch. I screamed, the sound echoing through the night as I fought against the creature's relentless assault. But it was no use. The Skinwalker was too powerful, too relentless in its pursuit of prey. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the Skinwalker vanished into the darkness, leaving me battered and bruised, but alive. As I limped home, the events of that night replayed in my mind, each moment etched into my memory with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. I knew that I had come face to face with true evil, and that the scars of that encounter would never truly heal. From that day forward, I lived in constant fear of the Skinwalker's return, haunted by the knowledge that it could strike again at any moment. And though I pray that I never encounter it again, a part of me knows that the creature's whispers will haunt me for the rest of my days. Deep in the heart of the Pacific Northwest lies a forest shrouded in mystery. It's a place where ancient secrets linger, where the trees whisper tales of creatures long forgotten. And it's where I had my own terrifying encounter with the legendary Sasquatch. It was a crisp autumn evening when I set out on a solo camping trip, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. Little did I know that my peaceful retreat would soon descend into a nightmare beyond imagination. As night fell, I built a small campfire and settled in for the night, the crackling flames providing a sense of comfort in the darkness. But as I drifted off to sleep, A strange sensation washed over me, feeling of being watched. I brushed it off as nerves, attributing it to the unfamiliarity of my surroundings. But as the hours passed, the feeling only grew stronger, until it was impossible to ignore. That's when I heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footfalls crunching through the underbrush, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent a shiver down my spine. My blood ran cold as I realized that I was not alone in the forest. Tearing into the darkness, I caught a glimpse of a massive figure lurking among the trees, a creature unlike anything I had ever seen, standing nearly 10 feet tall with broad shoulders and long, shaggy fur. It was a sight straight out of legend. Fear gripped me as I watched the creature move with a primal grace, its movements fluid and deliberate. I knew I should run, to flee from this unknown entity, and never look back. But something held me rooted to the spot, a morbid curiosity that compelled me to stay and face whatever fate awaited me. The Sasquatch drew closer, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as it fixed its gaze upon me. I could feel its presence like a weight upon my chest, suffocating me with a sense of dread. For what felt like an eternity, he stood locked in our silent standoff, neither willing to make the first move. And then, with a suddenness that took me by surprise, the Sasquatch let out a deafening roar that echoed through the forest, sending birds scattering into the night sky. With that final display of dominance, the Sasquatch turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving me alone in the eerie stillness of the forest. I sat there, trembling with fear and awe, unsure of what I had just witnessed. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, I packed up my camp and fled from the forest. The memory of that encounter burned into my mind like a brand. I may never know the truth behind the Sasquatch's existence, but one thing is certain: it is a force to be reckoned with, a creature of legend that walks among us in the shadows of the night. Growing up in the swamps of Louisiana, I had always heard tales of the rougarou, a fearsome creature, said to stalk the bayous under the cover of darkness. But it wasn't until one fateful night that I came face to face with the beast that haunted my nightmares. It was a hot and humid evening when I set out on a fishing trip with my friends, eager to spend a night beneath the stars and catch some dinner. Little did I know that our excursion would soon take a terrifying turn. As we navigated the murky waters of the bayou, the air thick with the scent of mud and decay, a sense of unease settled over me. The swamp seemed to come alive with strange noises, the croak of bullfrogs, the splash of alligators, and something else, something sinister lurking in the shadows. That's when we heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps splashing through the water, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that sent a chill down my spine. We exchanged nervous glances, our hands tightening around our fishing poles as we strained to see through the darkness. And then, emerging from the depths of the swamp, came the creature, a hulking figure, with glowing red eyes and a snarling mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. It was the rougarou, a creature of legend, said to be cursed to roam the bayou in search of prey. Fear gripped us as the rougarou drew closer, its presence sending a wave of primal terror through our veins. We knew we had to act fast, to defend ourselves against this unholy beast that prowled the night. With a strength born of desperation, we fought back, hurling whatever makeshift weapons you could find at the creature. but it was no use. The rougarou was relentless, its attacks fierce and unyielding as it closed in on us with terrifying speed. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a deafening roar echoed through the swamp, followed by the sound of gunfire. Through the haze of fear and adrenaline, I saw a group of hunters emerge from the shadows, their weapons trained on the creature. With a final snarl, the rougarou turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving us shaken but alive. As we made our way back to civilization, the events of that night replayed in my mind, each moment etched into my memory with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. From that day forward, I knew that the legends of the rougarou were more than just stories. They were a warning, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the bayou. In the remote wilderness of Michigan, a creature of nightmares lurks in the shadows of being known only as the Dogman. It was on a camping trip in these untamed woods that I had my own harrowing encounter with this legendary beast. The air was crisp and cool as my friends and I set up camp for the night, the sounds of the forest coming alive around us. We laughed and joked as we roasted marshmallows over the fire, unaware of the terror that awaited us in the darkness. As night fell, a sense of unease settled over the camp, a feeling that we were not alone in the wilderness. The crackling of the fire seemed to echo louder, the rustle of leaves more ominous, as we huddled together for warmth. And then we heard the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps padding through the underbrush, accompanied by a low, guttural growl that froze us in our tracks. We strained to see through the darkness, our hearts pounding in our chests as we searched for the source of the noise. And then, emerging from the shadows, came the creature, a massive, wolf-like beast with glowing yellow eyes and razor-sharp teeth. It was the Dogman, a creature of legend, said to roam the forests of Michigan in search of prey. Fear gripped us as the Dogman drew closer, its presence sending a wave of primal terror through our veins. We knew we had to act fast, to defend ourselves against this unholy creature that prowled the night. With a strength born of desperation, we fought back, hurling whatever makeshift weapons you could find at the creature. But it was no use. The Dogman was relentless, its attacks fierce and unyielding as it closed in on us with terrifying speed. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a loud gunshot rang out through the night, followed by a chorus of howls and yelps. Through the haze of fear and adrenaline, I saw a group of hunters emerge from the trees, their guns trained on the creature. With a final snarl, the Dogman turned and vanished into the darkness, leaving us shaken but alive. As we made our way back to civilization, the events of that night replayed in my mind, each moment etched into my memory with a clarity that chilled me to the bone. From that day forward, I knew that the legends of the Dogman were more than just stories. They were a warning, a reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows of the wilderness. On a moonlit night in the heart of the Bavarian forest, I found myself face to face with a creature of myth and legend, a werewolf. It was an experience that would forever haunt my dreams and change the course of my life. I had been hiking through the dense forest, my senses alive with the sights and sounds of the wilderness, when I stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin nestled among the trees. Intrigued, I approached the dilapidated structure, unaware of the horror that lay in wait within. As I stepped through the door, a chill ran down my spine, and I felt a sense of unease settle over me. The air was thick with the scent of decay, and the walls seemed to pulse with a sinister energy. That's when I heard a sound of heavy breathing echoing through the darkness of the cabin. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as I strained to see through the gloom. And then, emerging from the shadows, came the creature, a massive, wolf-like beast with glowing yellow eyes and bared fangs. It was a werewolf, a creature cursed to roam the night, its human form transformed into that of a savage predator under the light of the full moon. Fear gripped me as the werewolf drew closer, its eyes burning with a feral intensity. I knew I had to act fast, to defend myself against this unholy creature that prowled the night. With a strength born of desperation, I fought back, using whatever weapons I could find to fend off the beast. But it was no use. The werewolf was relentless, its attacks fierce and unyielding as it closed in on me with terrifying speed. Just when it seemed that all hope was lost, a ray of moonlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the cabin in an ethereal glow. In that moment I saw a glimmer of humanity in the werewolf's eyes, a fleeting moment of recognition before it turned and fled into the night. As I emerged from the cabin, shaken but alive, I knew that my life would never be the same. The encounter had changed me, leaving me with a newfound respect for the mysteries of the night and the creatures that dwell within it. From that day forward, I lived with the knowledge that werewolves were real, and that they walked among us in the shadows of the forest. And though I pray that I never encounter one again, a part of me knows that the memory of that night will stay with me forever. The air hung heavy with the smell of sage and fear. My headlamp cut a weak path through the inky blackness, revealing nothing but twisted scrub brush and the occasional glint of a quartz shard. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic counterpoint to the chirping crickets. It had been a stupid mistake, venturing out alone at night on the Navajo reservation. Earlier that day, an elder from the nearby village had warned me about the Skinwalkers, shapeshifters. He'd called them malevolent spirits that could mimic anything, even a human voice. He'd begged me to stay close to the research camp, but the lure of a rare mineral formation, rumored to be hidden deep within the canyons, had been too strong. Now regret gnawed at me like a hungry beast. Every rustle of leaves, every distant owl call sent shivers down my spine. Then I heard it, a woman's voice, soft and pleading, calling my name from somewhere ahead. "Sarah, help me." It was my lab partner, Emily's voice, laced with panic. Without a second thought, I plunged deeper into the darkness, following the sound. The voice grew louder, more urgent, but something felt off. It was too perfect, too high pitch, not quite Emily. Suddenly the brush parted, and a figure emerged from the shadows, bathed in the weak light of my headlamp. It looked like Emily, her face pale and streaked with dirt. Relief washed over me, momentarily drowning out the lingering unease. "Emily, thank goodness you're all right." I rushed forward, my arms outstretched. The figure smiled, a smile to why, revealing sharpened teeth that gleamed in the darkness. A guttural growl erupted from its throat, a sound that ripped through any semblance of calm I had. It lunged. I stumbled backward, screaming, the realization crashing down on me like a boulder. It wasn't Emily, it was the Skinwalker, a monstrous entity wearing the skin of my friend. The chase was a blur of adrenaline and terror. The Skinwalker possessed an unnatural agility, weaving through the scrub far faster than I could hope to match. My lungs burned, my legs ached, but the primal fear of being hunted kept me moving. Just when I thought I couldn't run another step, I saw a faint orange glow in the distance. It was the research camp. With a burst of renewed energy, I sprinted towards the welcome light. Pray it would be enough. As I burst into the camp, I slammed the rickety door shut behind me. Throwing the heavy bar across it, I collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air, tears streaming down my face. My ragged breaths filled the tiny cabin, the only sound besides the pounding of my heart. Through the thin walls I could hear the frustrated snarls of the Skinwalker outside. The flimsy door creaked under its assault, but held. Dawn seemed an eternity away. As the long night slowly bled into an uncertain morning, the sounds outside finally subsided, but the experience left me forever marked. I never spoke of the incident, but the chilling memory of the Skinwalker's mimicry, the horrifying reminder of what lurked in the shadows, would forever haunt me. The towering pines whispered secrets in the crisp mountain air. Sunlight dappled the forest floor as I led my group of enthusiastic hikers deeper into the wilderness. It was a beautiful day for a trek, the kind that brought tourists flocking to the park. Little did they know the majestic pines held a secret, one that had haunted my own life for years. This very trail, nestled deep in the heart of the national park, was where I'd had my first encounter with a Sasquatch, a creature most dismissed as a myth. It was 10 years ago, and the memory still sent shivers down my spine. Back then, I was a rookie ranger, eager to prove myself. We were on patrol, and we heard it, a bone-chilling roar that seemed to shake the very trees. It was unlike anything I had ever heard, a primal scream filled with raw power, and something primal. Panic gripped the team, but adrenaline kept me moving. We followed the sound, pushing through thick undergrowth, until we emerged into a clearing. There, bathed in a shaft of sunlight, stood a colossal figure. It was unlike anything I had ever seen in a textbook. Towering well over 8 feet tall, it was covered in thick, matted fur. Its eyes gleamed with an intelligence that defied its pestilent appearance. For a heart-stopping moment, our eyes locked. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, the creature vanished into the thick brush, leaving behind only the lingering scent of damp earth and a deafening silence. The rest of the team laughed it off, dismissing it as a bear, but I knew better. This encounter sparked an obsession. I spent years studying Sasquatch folklore, scouring these very woods for any sign, any clue to their existence. Today, leading this group, the memory of that encounter resurfaced. As we rounded a bend in the trail, I noticed a disturbing sight. A large patch of trees had been uprooted. Their massive trunks snapped like twigs. The ground was turned up, leaving behind enormous footprints. A collective gasp rose from the group. Fear flickered in their eyes, fear that mirrored my own. Could it be? Was it here, in these very woods, again? A twig snapped behind us. I spun around, heart pounding, but saw nothing but the rustling leaves. The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive. Suddenly, from the depths of the forest, came a sound that made my blood run cold. It was a low, guttural howl, the same chilling roar that had haunted me for a decade. The hikers looked at me with wide eyes, a silent plea for answers. I knew what I had to do. With a forced smile, I gripped my walkie-talkie. Looks like we have some excited wildlife out there today. Time to turn back, folks. The group, shaken but relieved, followed my lead. We retraced our steps, the howl echoing behind us, a haunting reminder of the creature that lurked unseen in the vast wilderness. Whether it was the same Sasquatch I encountered years ago, I didn't know. What I did know was that these woods held a secret, a powerful being that commanded respect and, perhaps, a healthy dose of fear. The encounter left its mark on the group, a hushed reverence replacing their initial excitement. For me, it reignited my own quiet obsession. Perhaps one day these magnificent creatures would reveal themselves, perhaps not. But the echoes of that howl in the pines would forever be a reminder of the day I came face to face with the legend of Sasquatch. Blackwood Bog had always been a place of whisper, legends, and nervous glances. The locals spoke of a monstrous creature that lurked within its murky depths, a twisted amalgam of dog and man the Dogman. We, a group of thrill-seeking teenagers, scoffed at these stories, or at least we pretended to. Tonight, under the cloak of a full moon, we decided to prove our own bravery or stupidity, depending on how you looked at it, by venturing into the swamp, armed with flashlights and a bravado that masked our simmering unease. We plunged into the oppressive darkness. The air hung heavy with the smell of decaying vegetation and stagnant water. Mosquitoes buzzed in our ears, and unseen creatures rustled in the reeds. Every creak of a branch, every splash in the water sent shivers down my spine. We waded deeper, the bog floor sucking at our boots with each step. The dense foliage overhead blocked out most of the moonlight, casting eerie shadows that danced on the water's surface. Suddenly, Sarah, at the front of the group, let out a yelp. Her flashlight beam darted wildly, illuminating a set of glowing eyes reflecting back from the darkness. A low growl, guttural and primal, echoed across the swamp. Panic surged through me. We scrambled back, tripping over exposed roots and tangled vines. The growls grew louder, closer. Then we saw it. Emerging from the gloom was a creature unlike anything I had ever imagined. It stood on its hind legs, easily taller than a man, its body a grotesque mix of canine and human. Its matted fur hung in clumps, and its eyes glowed with an eerie red light. A blood-curdling snarl ripped from its throat, and it launched itself towards us. We scattered, the primal urge for survival overriding our fear. I sprinted blindly, the sounds of crashing branches and panic shots filling the air. Behind me, I could hear the heavy thumps of the creature's pursuit, its ragged breaths hot on my heels. I burst through a thicket and stumbled into a clearing, collapsing onto the damp ground. Gasping for breath, I dared a glance back. I saw nothing but the inky blackness of the swamp, the chilling silence broken only by the distant croaking of frogs. Slowly, the weight of terror pressed down on me. Had I escaped, or was it just toying with me? We regrouped at the edge of the swamp, shaken and blooded, but alive. None of us spoke of what we had seen that night, but the shared experience forged a bond of silent understanding. Blackwood Bog held its secrets close, and the legend of the Dogman became a chilling reality for us. We never ventured back into the swamp, but the memory of that encounter, the chilling image of the monstrous creature, would forever haunt my nightmares. wind howled a mournful song outside, rattling the weathered shutters of my cabin. A full moon, fat and ominous, hung heavy in the inky sky, its silvery light casting long skeletal shadows across the snow-dusted landscape. A shiver danced down my spine, a stark contrast to the crackling warmth of the fire in the stone hearth. Tonight wasn't like any other night in the mountains. Tonight was the hunter's moon, a time whispered of in hushed tones by old-timers, a time when the veil between worlds thinned and the creatures of legend walked the earth. I scoffed at the superstition then, but now, as I settled into my worn armchair with a steaming mug of coffee, a sliver of unease gnawed at the edges of my usual stoicism. The silence, usually a welcome companion, felt heavy with anticipation. Suddenly, a sound shattered the stillness. A long, mournful howl echoed through the valley, a sound unlike anything I had ever heard. It wasn't the sharp, high-pitched call of a wolf, but a deeper, more primal howl filled with a bone-chilling rage. It sent a jolt through me, raising the hairs on the back of my neck. My hand instinctively reached for the well-worn hunting rifle that rested beside the fireplace. It was a beautiful weapon, a Winchester Model 70, passed down from my grandfather, a man who'd known these mountains like the back of his hand. Doubt flickered across my mind. Had I been foolish to come alone during this time? Dismissing the thought with a snort, I checked the chamber, the satisfying click of the lever of familiar comfort. The cabin walls, adorned with mounted trophies from past hunts, seemed to close in around me, offering little solace. As the night wore on, the howls grew closer, circling the cabin like a hungry predator stalking its prey. Each howl was followed by an unnerving silence, a silence that hummed with a latent threat. Curiosity, a trait I rarely indulge, gnawed at me. I crept towards the window, peering out cautiously through the frost-covered pane. The moonlight cast an eerie glow on the snow outside, revealing nothing but the dancing shadows of the wind-blown pines. But then I saw it, a flicker of movement at the edge of the tree line. My breath hitched in my throat. Two glowing red eyes, burning embers in the darkness, stared back at me. They were unlike any animal eyes I'd ever seen, filled with an intelligence that sent a wave of terror down my spine. A low growl rumbled through the night, a sound that vibrated through the floorboards and into my very core. The creature emerged from the shadows, a monstrous figure that defied description. It was vaguely humanoid, its body massive and powerful, covered in thick, matted fur that shimmered an unnatural silver under the moon's light. A primal scream escaped my throat, a sound quickly swallowed by the vastness of the night. The werewolf, for that's what it had to be, snarled, revealing a maw filled with razor-sharp fangs that gleamed with a deadly glint. The stench of carrion and wet earth assaulted my senses, adding another layer of horror to the scene. Fear threatened to paralyze me, but adrenaline surged through my veins, jolting me into action. I grabbed my rifle, aiming at the monstrous beast before me. This wasn't a deer or a bear. One shot was my only chance. The werewolf lunged, a blur of teeth and claws against the moonlit backdrop. I squeezed the trigger, the deafening blast echoing through the valley. I didn't wait to see if it hit. With a burst of adrenaline, I scrambled back from the window, throwing the heavy oak table against the door in a desperate attempt to barricade myself in. The rest of the night was a blur of frantic activity. The werewolf howled in frustration, its monstrous claws tearing at the sturdy wooden door. Splinters rained down from the frame, gouged out with each desperate swipe. Crouched behind the table, I held my breath, listening to the sounds of the creature's relentless assault. My mind raced, replaying the encounter, questioning my sanity. Finally, as the first rays of dawn painted the sky with streaks of pecan gold, the howls faded, replaced by an eerie silence. Relief washed over me in waves, so complete that it left. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool night air. The towering cornstalks, usually a source of pride for our family farm, now loom ominously, their leaves rustling like unseen whispers. Tonight the power had gone out, plunging the farm into an inky blackness. I volunteered to check on the irrigation lines running through the heart of the cornfield. Armed with a flashlight and a gnawing sense of unease, I ventured into the maze of stalks. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic chirping of crickets and the occasional rustle of unseen creatures. Every creak of a stalk, every flutter of a night bird sent a jolt of fear through me. The corn grew taller than me, its leaves forming a dark canopy overhead. The narrow path I created with my flashlight felt more like a tunnel, closing in on all sides. Memories of childhood stories about Bigfoot, the legendary giant ape said to roam these woods, flooded my mind. Suddenly the flashlight flickered, then died. Plunged into darkness, I fumbled for extra batteries, my heart hammering against my ribs. A low growl, guttural and primal, echoed from somewhere within the cornfield. Panic seized me. I spun around, but the darkness was all-encompassing. The growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by a snapping of branches. I stumbled back, tripping over a hidden root and crashing to the ground. Terror choked my scream. I lay there, gasping for breath, fear paralyzing me. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw a faint outline, a massive shape moving through the corn stalks. A pungent, musky odor filled my nostrils, unlike anything I had ever encountered. The snapping of branches intensified, accompanied by the sound of heavy footsteps coming towards me. Tears streamed down my face as I fumbled for my phone, its dim screen offering a sliver of hope. With shaking hands, I managed to dial 911, the silence broken only by the low hum of the dial tone. "Hello, help," I shrieked into the receiver, my voice a ragged plea, but there was no answer, only static. The call dropped. Just then a massive hand, covered in thick fur and coarse hair, reached down and grasped my arm. I let out a blood-curdling scream, the sound swallowed by the endless rows of corn. The giant figure pulled me up, its strength immense. I caught a glimpse of a hulking silhouette, vaguely humanoid, but far larger than any man. Terror choked off any further scream. The creature held me for a heart-stopping moment, then with surprising gentleness placed me back on the ground. It stood there for a beat longer, its presence overwhelming, then turned and vanished back into the depths of the cornfield. Left alone in the darkness, I scrambled to my feet, my legs shaking uncontrollably. I sprinted blindly through the cornfield, the sound of my own ragged breaths filling my ears. Finally, I burst out of the cornfield, collapsing onto the dew-covered grass outside. Tears streamed down my face, a mixture of relief and terror. The power returned later that morning, bathing the farm in a comforting light. But the memory of that night, the encounter with the unseen giant, would forever linger, The whispers in the cornfield became a chilling reminder of a secret held within its depths, a secret I dared not speak of. The wind howled like a banshee outside, rattling the old windows of the cottage. Rain lashed against the stone walls, a relentless drumming that seemed to seep into my very bones. I huddled deeper into my armchair, the crackling fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. The isolation of the moors was both inspiring and unsettling. It was the perfect setting for my new Gothic novel, a tale of dark secrets and otherworldly beings. But tonight, the isolation felt oppressive, the vast emptiness outside pressing in on the tiny cottage. As I sipped my tea, a flicker of movement in the corner of my eye caught my attention. I glanced towards the window, but saw only the swirling mist outside. Dismissing it as a trick of the shadows, I returned to my manuscript. However, the feeling of being watched persisted. A prickling sensation crawled up my spine, and I couldn't shake the sense of unseen eyes upon me. I put down my pen, the silence in the room becoming deafening. Suddenly, a cold draught swept through the room, extinguishing the fire in the hearth. The cottage plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the sliver of moon fighting its way through the thick clouds. Panic surged through me. I fumbled for a lighter, its flame a tiny beacon against the encroaching darkness. As I lit a nearby candle, I caught a glimpse of something move in the corner of my eye. A faint, insubstantial figure stood there, a shadowy outline barely discernible against the darkness. It had no features, no eyes, just an empty black shape that seemed to absorb the light around it. A scream died in my throat, my breath hitched, and I felt the room temperature plummet. The shadow person, as they were called in local folklore, remained motionless, its presence a suffocating weight on my chest. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Then, as abruptly as it appeared, the shadow person vanished. The cold air dissipated, replaced by the warmth of the rekindled fire. Shaken to my core, I collapsed onto the couch, tears streaming down my face. Rationality fought with a primal fear that gripped me. Was it just a trick of the mind, brought on by the isolation and my overactive imagination? But the lingering sense of dread, the cold spot in the corner where the figure stood, told a different story. I spent the rest of the night huddled beneath a blanket, the sound of the wind and rain a constant reminder of the unsettling encounter. The next morning, the mist had cleared, revealing the desolate beauty of the moors, but the memory of the shadow person lingered, a chilling reminder of the secrets that lurked within the ancient stones and the hidden corners of the moors. The experience would find its way into my novel, adding a layer of unsettling realism to the story. However, it also planted a seed of doubt in my mind. Was there more to the world than meets the eye? And were the stories, whispered in hushed tones about the shadow people, just a little too real? The air hung thick with the smell of damp earth and stale air. My headlamp pierced the inky blackness of the abandoned subway tunnel, revealing nothing but crumbling concrete walls adorned with faded graffiti and the occasional rusted pipe. The rhythmic drip-drip of water echoed through the cavernous space, the only sound besides the ragged thud of my own heartbeat. I wasn't supposed to be here. These tunnels, long abandoned after a catastrophic flood, were officially off limits. But for me, Alex, the thrill of the unknown outweighed any potential danger. Tonight's exploration was fueled by whispers of something more sinister lurking in these depths. The crawlers, monstrous humanoid creatures, pale and eyeless, said to inhabit the damp darkness, feeding on anything unfortunate enough to cross their path. Most dismissed them as urban legends, but a part of me, the part that craved a good scare, hoped for a glimpse of something, anything. The tunnel narrowed, the uneven ground littered with debris, rusted tracks, broken bricks, and the skeletal remains of something long dead. My foot snagged on a loose wire, sending a jolt of electricity through my body. I stumbled, cursing under my breath, as I reached for my backpack to grab a spare bulb for my headlamp. A sound echoed from the darkness ahead, a low, guttural scraping, like claws dragging on concrete. My blood ran cold. The stories about the crawlers suddenly felt far too real. I froze, the silence after the scraping sound amplifying the pounding of my heart. Then I saw it, a flicker of movement in the distance, a pale, elongated shape scuttling along the tunnel wall. Panic surged through me, erasing any lingering doubts. It was a crawler, its body a grotesque parody of a human, its limbs long and spindly, its skin a sickly, translucent white. Terror fueled my actions. I scrambled back, my headlamp catching the creature's eyeless face, a gaping maw filled with rows of razor-sharp teeth. It let out a blood-curdling shriek, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. I didn't wait to see what it would do next. Adrenaline coursing through my veins, I bolted, the sound of my own ragged breaths and pounding feet echoing through the tunnel. Behind me, I could hear the scraping sound growing louder, the creature in hot pursuit. I pushed myself harder, lungs burning, legs screaming in protest. Finally, a faint light appeared in the distance, the exit. With a burst of energy, I surged forward, throwing myself through the opening and slamming the heavy metal gate shut behind me. Gasping for breath, I collapsed onto the dusty concrete floor, the sounds of the city echoing above. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum solo celebrating my narrow escape. The encounter left me shaken, a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk beneath the surface of even the most familiar places. The crawlers may be just a legend to some, but for me, they were a chilling reality, a memory that would forever haunt my explorations of the forgotten corners of the city. The sun beat down on my neck as I guided the group of kayakers across the glassy surface of the lake. Laughter and excited chatter filled the air, a pleasant contrast to the usual quiet serenity of this hidden gem. The lake, known for its crystal-clear water and vibrant fish population, was a popular spot for kayaking and fishing. Today I was leading a tour of its lesser-known coves, tucked away amidst towering pines and rocky cliffs. As we paddled deeper into a secluded inlet, a hush fell over the group. The towering trees cast long shadows on the water, creating an atmosphere of hushed anticipation. Suddenly, Sarah, a young woman in the back of the group, let out a startled gasp. Her paddle dipped into the water, sending ripples across the previously still surface. Her eyes were wide with terror as she pointed towards the center of the cove. "There, did you see that?" she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. I followed her gaze, but saw nothing but the shimmery reflection of the sky on the water. However, a prickling sensation danced down my spine. "See what, Sarah?" I asked, trying to sound calm despite the growing unease in my gut. "A shadow," she murmured, "a huge one, just beneath the surface." The other kayakers murmured amongst themselves, some skeptical, others visibly shaken. Just then the water in the center of the cove erupted. A monstrous shape, long and sinuous, broke the surface. A collective gasp escaped the group as they witnessed the creature for themselves. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Its body, a dark, serpentine form, was easily the size of a large truck. Its head, vaguely reptilian, emerged from the water, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth and glowing yellow eyes that fixated on us with chilling intelligence. Panic surged through the group. Paddles churned the water as everyone tried to move away from the monstrous creature. It let out a deafening roar, a sound that resonated through the very bones of my body. Fear threatened to paralyze me, but adrenaline kicked in. Blowing my whistle, I shouted instructions, directing the group towards the narrow outlet of the cove, the only escape route. The creature seemed to understand our panic. It thrashed in the water, causing waves to rock our kayaks precariously. I could hear the terrified screams of the kayakers as they fought to maintain control of their vessels. Finally, we reached the outlet. Relief washed over me as we paddled furiously back towards the open water. I didn't dare look back, but the chilling memory of those glowing eyes and the raw power of the creature remained seared into my mind. Back at the dock, shaken but unharmed, the group recounted their encounter with a mix of disbelief and terror. News of the lake monster spread like wildfire, turning the once tranquil lake into a place of legend and fear. The Park Service, under pressure from concerned citizens, declared the cove off limits. But for me, the encounter remained a chilling reminder that the depths of even the most beautiful lakes hold secrets best left undisturbed. The air hung heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth as we navigated the winding trail. The full moon bathed the forest floor in an ethereal light, casting long shadows that danced with every rustle of leaves. My group, a mix of excited college students and curious families, peppered me with questions about the local legends. As a park ranger, I knew all about the stories whispered around campfires, tales of Bigfoot sightings and strange lights in the sky. But one legend held a particular weight, the legend of the Hocking Hills werewolf, a creature said to roam these woods under the cloak of darkness, a monstrous fusion of man and beast. Of course, I dismissed it all as folklore, a way to spook tourists. But tonight, a prickling unease crawled down my spine as we venture deeper into the heart of the forest. Then we heard it, a long, mournful howl that echoed through the trees, a sound that set shivers down everyone's spine. It wasn't the howl of a lone coyote. It was something far deeper, more primal. The group froze, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and morbid curiosity. My own heart pounded in my chest, a drumbeat against the sudden silence that followed the howl. "Just a coyote," I stammered, trying to sound confident despite the unease twisting my gut. But the silence stretched on, broken only by the frantic chirping of startled insects. Then a twig snapped in the distance. Panic surged through the group. I grabbed my flashlight, its beam cutting a weak path through the dense foliage. "Stay together," I commanded, my voice strained. "Don't wander off the trail." We continued on, the forest pressing in on us like a malevolent force. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of fear through our small group. Then we saw it, a hulking figure emerged from the undergrowth, bathed in the moonlight, its eyes blowing embers in the darkness, locked on us with a predatory intensity. Its body, a grotesque combination of man and wolf, rippled with power. The werewolf let out another bone-chilling howl, a sound that seemed to shake the very trees. Terror took hold, the group scattered, their screams echoing through the night. I knew I had to act fast. Remembering a ranger training session, I grabbed a handful of flares from my backpack and ignited them. The sudden burst of light momentarily startled the creature. Using the opportunity, I yelled for the group to regroup at the trailhead. We sprinted back, fueled by pure adrenaline, the howls of the werewolf echoing behind us. We reached the trailhead, panting and shaken, and huddled together until park rangers arrived, alerted by the screams and flares. Back at the ranger station, safe and sound, the encounter still felt like a horrifying nightmare. The howl of the werewolf, the chilling sight of its monstrous form, would forever be etched in my memory. The legend of the Hocking Hills werewolf might be just a story, but that night, in the heart of the ancient forest, it became a terrifying reality. Sweat trickled down my forehead as I navigated the labyrinthine swamp, my boot sinking into the muddy ground with every step. The air was thick with humidity, the stench of decaying vegetation clinging to my clothes. Mosquitoes buzzed relentlessly around my head, and unseen creatures rustled in the dense foliage, sending shivers down my spine. Despite the discomfort, a thrill of excitement coursed through me. This was my element, the untamed wilderness where nature reigned supreme. My camera, a trusty companion on countless expeditions, hung heavy around my neck. My primary target, the elusive cottonmouth snake, a local legend known for its aggressive behavior and venomous bite. As I ventured deeper into the swamp, the sunlight struggled to penetrate the thick canopy of cypress trees overhead. An unsettling silence descended, broken only by the occasional splash of a startled frog. Suddenly, a twig snapped behind me. I froze, heart hammering in my chest. Slowly, I turned, scanning the dense foliage for any sign of movement. There, in the shadows between the trees, I saw it. A hulking figure stood on its hind legs, its eyes gleaming with an unnatural red light that reflected off the murky water. It was a Dogman, a monstrous creature whispered about in local folklore, a hair-covered bipedal beast, with the savage instincts of a dog and the strength of a bear. Terror flooded my veins. I knew the stories, tales of missing livestock, and the occasional unfortunate soul who vanished into the swamp, never to be seen again. The Dogman let out a low growl, a sound that vibrated through the very air. I fumbled with my camera strap, desperately trying to free it. A camera flash was my only hope, a chance to momentarily startle the creature. Just as I managed to yank the camera free, the Dogman lunged. I screamed, raising the camera in front of me. A blinding flash erupted, momentarily illuminating the creature's grotesque form. The Dogman recoiled from the sudden light, its growl turning into a startled yell. I seized the opportunity and bolted, adrenaline propelling me forward. I plunged deeper into the swamp, ignoring the stinging mosquito bites and the treacherous terrain. The sounds of crashing branches and heavy footsteps told me the Dogman was in pursuit. Tears streamed down my face as I pushed myself to the limit, my lungs burning. Finally, I emerged from the dense brush onto a clearing. In the distance, I spotted the familiar wooden planks of a swamp boardwalk. Scrambling onto the boardwalk, I didn't dare look back. I sprinted towards the rickety wooden bridge that led back to civilization, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Reaching the bridge, I collapsed onto the rough planks, gasping for breath. Behind me, the sounds of pursuit had faded. The encounter left me shaken to the core. The image of the Dogman, its glowing eyes and menacing presence, would forever be etched in my memory. The swamp held its secrets close, and the legend of the Dogman, once just a campfire story, became a chilling reality I would never forget. The sun peeked through the dense canopy of towering pines, casting dappled light on the forest floor. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs with each labored breath as I ascended the treacherous mountain trail. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool temperature, a testament to the physical exertion of the climb. Solitude was my companion. The only sound the rhythmic crunch of my boots on the rocky path and the distant gurgling of a hidden stream. I was no stranger to the wilderness. Years of mountain climbing had honed my skills and instilled in me a deep respect for the untamed beauty of nature. Yet a nagging unease prickled at the back of my mind. This particular region was shrouded in legend whispers of a giant, hairy humanoid creature said to roam these remote mountains. The locals called it Sasquatch, a mythical beast dismissed by most as a figment of overactive imaginations. Despite my skepticism, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of nervous anticipation through me. As the day wore on, the temperature dropped, and a thick mist rolled in, obscuring the already limited visibility. The path narrowed, becoming a treacherous scramble over moss-covered rocks and fallen logs. Suddenly, a loud, guttural cry echoed through the valley, a sound unlike anything I had ever heard. It was a primal yell, a mixture of frustration and anger that sent shivers down my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs as I froze, every survival instinct screaming at me to run. But a morbid curiosity, a need to unravel the mystery, kept me rooted to the spot. Straining my ears, I tried to pinpoint the source of the sound. Then I saw it, a massive, shadowy figure lumbering through the mist towards me. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. Towering over 10 feet tall and covered in thick fur, the creature moved with surprising agility despite its size. Its eyes, glowing embers in the mist, locked onto me with an unnerving intensity. Terror threatened to paralyze me, but a primal urge for survival kicked in. I scrambled back, my boot slipping on the loose rocks. The creature let out another earth-shattering roar, the sound echoing through the valley. It charged towards me, its massive form a terrifying blur in the swirling mist. Panic fueled my movements. I stumbled back, desperately searching for an escape route. Just then I spotted a narrow crevice in the rock face, barely wide enough for me to squeeze through. With a final burst of adrenaline, I dove into the crevice, scraping against the rough rock edges. The creature reached the opening, its frustrated roar filling the narrow space. But thankfully, it was too large to fit through. Huddled inside the crevice, gasping for breath, I listened to the creature's enraged bellows, fade into the distance. As the adrenaline subsided, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. Emerging from the crevice, when the mist finally cleared, I looked around with a mixture of relief and dread. The encounter left me shaken, the image of the Sasquatch forever etched in my memory. The legend might be real, a truth whispered by the wind through the towering pines, and I, a solitary climber, had come face to face with the wildman of the mountain. Excitement bubbled within me as I gazed out the dusty car window. The unfamiliar landscape of the Navajo Nation reservation stretching out before me. This was my first time visiting my grandmother, a woman steeped in the traditions and legends of her people. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple, we reached my grandmother's modest adobe house. A warm smile lit up her wrinkled face. She embraced me, her welcome as comforting as the scent of freshly baked fry bread that filled the air. Over steaming mugs of herbal tea, I listened intently as my grandmother recounted stories passed down through generations, tales of bravery and resilience, but also of dark creatures that lurked at the fringes of human existence, the Lushi, or Skinwalkers. Skinwalkers, according to the legends, were powerful shapeshifters who could assume the form of any animal. They were said to be malevolent beings driven by greed and a thirst for power. Part of me dismissed these stories as mere folklore, a way to explain the unknown. But a sliver of unease lingered in the back of my mind. The next morning, my grandmother entrusted me with a small pouch containing a sacred herb, a safeguard against evil spirits. Her words, "Be wary of the twilight, child," echoed in my ears. Intrigued by the vast reservation land, I ventured out for a walk after breakfast. The setting sun cast long shadows, and the air grew strangely quiet. As twilight descended, a sense of unease settled over me. Suddenly, a raven landed on a nearby rock, its obsidian eyes fixed on me. Ravens were considered messengers of the Skinwalker in Navajo lore. My heart hammered against my ribs as the raven caught a harsh, unsettling sound. Then I saw it, a large coyote, emerge from the brush, its fur an unnatural shade of black. Its eyes, unlike any coyote I'd ever seen, glowed with an unsettling intelligence. A primal fear gripped me. My grandmother's warnings flooded back to me. This was no ordinary coyote. It was a Skinwalker in disguise. The creature began to approach, its movements fluid and predatory. I fumbled with the pouch, my hand trembling as I retrieved the sacred herb. As the Skinwalker lunged, I threw the herb into the air, its pungent aroma filling the twilight air. The creature recoiled, its guttural snarl echoing through the stillness. For a tense moment, we locked eyes. Then, with a final menacing growl, the Skinwalker turned and vanished into the gathering darkness. Relief washed over me, leaving me weak and trembling. The encounter left an indelible mark on me, a chilling reminder of the power of ancient legends and the creatures that lurked in the shadows. Sweat trickled down my forehead as I hacked through the thick undergrowth, my machete a dull thud against the resilient vines. The oppressive humidity hung heavy in the air, making every breath feel like a labor. Behind me, my team of seasoned researchers followed suit, their faces etched with a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. We were on a mission to uncover the secrets of a legendary lost city rumored to exist within the heart of the Amazon El Dorado, the city of gold. For years, the existence of El Dorado had been dismissed as a mere myth, a figment of the conquistadors' imaginations. But a series of recent discoveries, ancient artifacts, and indecipherable symbols hinted at a hidden civilization deep within the rainforest. Our days were filled with the drudgery of navigating the treacherous terrain, documenting flora and fauna, and searching for any sign of the lost city. Nights were spent huddled around crackling campfires, the symphony of the rainforest a constant lullaby. One particularly humid night, as I sat hunched over a map by the flickering firelight, a low growl pierced the cacophony of nocturnal creatures. The sound wasn't the guttural roar of a jaguar or the piercing shriek of a howler monkey. It was something else entirely, a deep, guttural rumble that sent shivers down my spine. A wave of unease washed over the camp. We grabbed flashlights and machetes, our hearts pounding in unison. Slowly we ventured towards the source of the sound, our senses on high alert. The jungle seemed to press in on us, the dense foliage swallowing the meager light cast by our flashlights. The air grew thick with an unspoken tension, broken only by the frantic beating of our hearts. Then we saw it, a pair of glowing eyes, emerald green and reptilian, emerge from the depths of the jungle. The creature moved with an unsettling grace, its massive form hidden by the shadows. It wasn't a jaguar, nor any animal I had ever encountered in my years studying the Amazon. Its silhouette hinted at something far more ancient, something out of legend. A collective gasp escaped our lips. Could this be the guardian of El Dorado, a creature whispered about in local folklore, the Mokele-Mbembe, a monstrous beast said to roam the deepest parts of the rainforest? Before we could react, the creature let out another earth-shattering growl and vanished back into the darkness. We stood there, frozen in place, the encounter leaving us speechless. The sighting of the Mokele-Mbembe, if that's what it was, ignited a spark of fear and curiosity within our team. Was it a figment of our imagination, fueled by the isolation and the pursuit of a lost city, or was it a genuine cryptid, a living legend guarding the secrets of El Dorado? The mystery remained unsolved, but the encounter left a profound impact. The Amazon rainforest, once a vast and fascinating ecosystem, now felt like a place of hidden dangers and unsolved enigmas. Our search for El Dorado continued, but with a newfound respect for the secrets this ancient jungle held close. The question lingered, were we searching for a city of gold, or had we stumbled upon something far more extraordinary, a creature of legend guarding a truth lost to time? The biting wind whipped at my face as I stood on the deck of the research vessel, the icy spray of the lock stinging my exposed skin. Beside me, my team huddled together, their faces a mixture of excitement and apprehension. We were on the cusp of history. Years of research, countless sonar scans, and endless speculation had brought us here to Loch Ness, a legendary body of water rumored to be home to a monstrous creature. I, Dr. Alistair Campbell, a man of science, had always approached the myth of the Loch Ness Monster with a healthy dose of skepticism, but the recent sonar pings, the blurry underwater photographs, something was amiss in the murky depths of the loch. Today we were deploying a new state-of-the-art submersible drone, equipped with powerful cameras and sonar technology. Our mission: to finally capture definitive proof of the creature's existence. As the drone plunged into the inky black water, a hush fell over the crew. We huddled around the monitor, the flickering screen our only window into the depths. The initial view was a monotonous expanse of darkness, broken only by the occasional flash of bioluminescent plankton. But then a flicker on the screen caught my eye. A long, dark shape, unlike anything I had ever seen on sonar before, moved with surprising speed through the water. The drone followed, its cameras struggling to pierce the gloom. Suddenly, the shape emerged from the shadows. A massive, serpentine neck broke the surface of the water, its head obscured by the swirling mist. It was unlike any known creature, long, sleek, and powerful, with eyes that glinted an eerie green in the depths. The crew erupted in a cacophony of gasps and shouts. This was it, the Loch Ness Monster, the elusive beast of legend revealed in all its terrifying glory. The creature, sensing the drone, let out a deafening bellow that echoed through the mist. It surged towards the drone, its massive form dwarfing the submersible in size. Panic seized me. We needed to get the drone back to the surface before it was crushed by the creature's immense power. With trembling hands, I maneuvered the controls, guiding the drone back towards the safety of the research vessel. The creature followed, its massive head breaking the surface again, its eyes locked on the retreating drone. Then, with a final thunderous splash, it vanished back into the depths of the loch. We retrieved the drone, our hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and elation. The footage was undeniable, a clear video of the Loch Ness Monster, not a grainy photograph or an ambiguous sonar ping. Back at the lab, the scientific community was abuzz. Our discovery made headlines worldwide, forever changing the perception of Loch Ness. The legend, once relegated to folklore, became a reality. The experience left me forever changed. As a scientist, I finally had my proof, but as a human being, I was left with a chilling sense of awe and respect for the mysteries that reside beneath the surface in the cold, dark depths of Loch Ness.